Mars has long been a source of mystery and fascination, with numerous anomalies discovered on its surface that challenge conventional explanations. Among the most intriguing is a square-shaped formation captured by the Mars Global Surveyor's orbiter camera. This unusual structure, visible in an image available through Arizona State University's Mars Image Explorer, has sparked intense debate among researchers and enthusiasts alike. Many believe that this geometric formation, along with other peculiar structures on Mars, warrants further investigation as it could potentially reveal artificial or unknown processes shaping the Martian landscape. The discovery of this square-shaped formation has raised profound questions about its origin. Unlike the chaotic natural formations typically seen on Mars, this structure exhibits a level of symmetry and geometric precision rarely found in nature. Most natural geological processes, such as erosion and volcanic activity, tend to create irregular, unpredictable formations. However, the almost perfect angles and well-defined edges of this Martian square suggest that it may not be the product of ordinary geological forces. Some skeptics argue that its unique shape indicates an artificial or intelligently designed origin, pointing to the possibility that Mars may have once harbored an advanced civilization or been visited by extraterrestrial beings in the distant past. If this theory holds, the square formation could represent the remnants of an ancient structure, now partially buried under Martian dust and sediment. One of the most compelling aspects of this formation is its location and scale. The image from the Mars Global Surveyor provides detailed measurements suggesting that the square formation is significantly large, far beyond the scale of ordinary rock formations. Its distinct shape compared to the surrounding terrain makes it stand out as an anomaly, further adding to the mystery of its existence. If it were merely the result of natural geological processes, one would expect to see other similarly shaped formations nearby. Yet this is not the case. This discrepancy raises questions about whether Mars has undergone processes unknown to mainstream science, or if intelligent intervention played a role in shaping its surface. Supporters of the artificial structure hypothesis argue that the square formation could be a remnant of an ancient Martian civilization, similar to the ruins of ancient cities found on Earth. They suggest that if Mars once had conditions capable of supporting life, it is entirely plausible that an advanced society could have flourished there before some catastrophic event led to its demise. Given the evidence of past water activity and the possibility of an ancient atmosphere, this theory is not as far-fetched as it might seem. If Mars did indeed host intelligent life in the distant past, structures like the square formation could be key to understanding the history of the planet and the fate of its inhabitants. Another possibility is that the square formation may be linked to extraterrestrial visitors. Some researchers speculate that Mars may have been used as a base or an outpost by non-human intelligences at some point in history. The precision of the square shape and its distinct edges lend credibility to the idea that it may have been deliberately constructed rather than formed through random geological processes. If true, this would suggest that Mars has played a far more significant role in interstellar history than previously thought. NASA and other space agencies have largely remained silent on the implications of these formations, often dismissing them as natural rock formations or imaging artifacts. However, this stance has not deterred independent researchers and analysts from continuing to investigate. With the increasing availability of high-resolution images from Mars rovers and orbiters, more anomalies are being identified, adding to the growing body of evidence suggesting Mars may not be the barren, lifeless world it is often portrayed to be. The presence of geometric formations on Mars raises profound questions about our understanding of planetary science and history. If the square formation is indeed artificial, it could revolutionize our understanding of Mars and the possibility of extraterrestrial intelligence. Despite skepticism from mainstream scientific circles, the demand for further study of these formations continues to grow. Many argue that future missions to Mars should prioritize the exploration of these anomalies using advanced technology to determine whether they are truly artificial in nature. With human missions to Mars on the horizon, the opportunity to investigate these structures up close may soon become a reality. If we are to uncover the true nature of Mars, we must be open to the possibility that what we find there could change everything we thought we knew about the universe. The square-shaped formation on Mars remains one of the most intriguing and unexplained discoveries in planetary exploration. Its geometric precision and distinct appearance challenge traditional explanations and fuel speculation about its possible artificial origins. Whether it is evidence of an ancient civilization, a remnant of extraterrestrial visitors, or a geological anomaly unlike any seen before, this formation demands further study. As humanity continues to explore the cosmos, we may one day uncover the truth about Mars and the mysterious structures that lie on its surface, revealing secrets that have been hidden for millennia. New research suggests that Mars might have all the necessary conditions for the appearance of life. Does it mean aliens could be already waiting for us on the red planet? Let's figure it out. On Mars, there are just the right conditions for photosynthesis beneath dusty ice layers in its mid-latitudes. And photosynthesis, the process used by plants, algae, and cyanobacteria to turn light into chemical energy, requires water and sunlight. On Mars, a thick layer of ice might filter out harmful solar radiation while letting enough light through to enable photosynthesis, creating what researchers call radiative habitable zones. This doesn't mean that, at the moment, life exists or has ever existed on Mars. At the same time, the findings give scientists clues about where to search for potential signs of life. Both Earth and Mars lie within the Sun's habitable zone, where temperatures can support liquid water. But while our planet's surface is covered with huge oceans, Mars appears dry and desolate. Yet evidence from NASA missions like Curiosity and Perseverance suggests it wasn't always this way. Ancient lake beds and river channels show that water flowed on Mars billions of years ago. Today, water exists on Mars primarily as ice, often in surprising locations. Scientists believe Mars lost its liquid water when its magnetic field faded, which led to its atmosphere getting stripped away by solar winds. With little atmosphere left to trap heat, water vapor escaped into space, leaving the surface cold and dry. Without an ozone layer, Mars also faces intense ultraviolet radiation, which destroys the complex molecules essential for life. Mars gets about 30% more harmful UV radiation than Earth. But dusty ice layers could shield potential habitats from this radiation while still letting in enough sunlight for photosynthesis. Using computer simulations, researchers found that dust within Martian ice could cause it to melt from below, forming thin layers of liquid water. These pockets could be shielded from evaporation by the overlying ice, creating the two essential ingredients for photosynthesis: water and sunlight. Past studies also suggest that even small amounts of dust, less than 1%, in dense Martian snow, can enable melting in mid-latitudes. Observations of exposed dusty ice near Martian gullies also support the idea that these conditions could form shallow liquid water layers under the surface. At the same time, the amount of dust in the ice plays a critical role. Ice with too much dust blocks sunlight, while ice with just the right amount, from 0.01 to 0.1%, can create habitable zones at depths of 2 to 15 inches. Cleaner ice could allow these zones to form deeper, between 7 and 10 feet. As for Mars's polar regions, even though they're rich in ice, they are likely too cold for this melting to occur, making mid-latitudes a more promising target. Interestingly, similar habitats exist on Earth, providing an analog for what might happen on Mars. On Earth, cryoconite holes form when dust and sediment heat ice surfaces, melting them enough to create pockets of liquid water beneath. These translucent ice layers allow sunlight to go through, and researchers have discovered microorganisms living in these shallow subsurface environments. While they go dormant in winter, when sunlight returns in the summer, it reactivates these tiny ecosystems. While this research doesn't confirm the existence of life on Mars per se, it does open up new avenues for exploration. Understanding how dusty ice interacts with sunlight and melts could help identify potential habitable zones on the red planet. The research team is planning to refine their simulations to better pinpoint where and when melting might occur on Mars. They're also recreating these conditions in the lab to study them in greater detail. This work could provide important insights for future missions looking for signs of life on Mars.
The red, parched earth under your feet is shaking. Large cracks are opening in the ground, threatening to swallow you. But unlike on Earth, these quakes aren't coming from within the planet. A threat coming from space is triggering them. Scientists have made a shocking discovery about Mars quakes. By using AI and NASA's InSight data, they found out that some of those tremors are caused by meteorite impacts. It means that Mars gets hit 2.5 times more often than we thought, and new craters are forming all the time. But the scariest part is that these impacts don't just shake the ground. They send powerful shock waves deep into the planet, revealing a hidden seismic highway and an unstable interior, unlike anything we imagined. This changes everything we thought we knew about Mars. So now, the big question is, what else is lurking beneath the surface? But let's follow scientists' train of thought first. They took Marsquake data from NASA's InSight lander and compared it with fresh impact craters spotted by the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. That's when they discovered that some impacts create a seismic highway through the mantle instead of being absorbed by the crust. Even though NASA shut down InSight in 2022, its data is still precious. The lander, which placed a seismometer on Mars, recorded over 1,300 Marsquakes, some caused by underground rock cracking under heat and pressure, others, apparently, by meteoroids slamming into the surface of the red planet. By studying how seismic waves move through the crust, mantle, and core, scientists keep piecing together Mars's deep structure. In the past, researchers already linked impact craters with seismic data. But these new studies are the first time when a fresh impact has been connected to quakes detected in Cerberus fossae. That's a highly active region 1,000 miles away from InSight. Scientists have discovered this 71-foot-wide crater much farther from NASA's InSight lander than expected, if we consider the strength of the seismic waves it produced. Mars's crust was thought to absorb most of the energy from impacts, which would limit how far seismic waves could travel. But the analysis of this crater revealed that, instead of getting dampened, the waves took a more direct and deeper path through the planet's mantle. This unexpected finding suggests that Mars has a seismic highway, which allows quakes to spread much farther than previously believed. Now, the InSight team will need to reassess their models of Mars' internal composition and structure. And then, we might better understand how impact-generated seismic signals can reach such depths. Manually sorting through the vast amount of data would have taken years. But luckily, these days, there are new tools, and scientists can go from tens of thousands of images to just a few in a matter of days. So, researchers focused on finding craters within approximately 1,800 miles of InSight's location. Their aim was to identify those that formed while the lander's seismometer was active. By comparing before and after images from the context camera over time, they identified 123 fresh craters to cross-reference with InSight seismic data. Out of those, 49 craters were potential matches for quakes detected by InSight seismometer. And after conducting some more analysis, the team decided that the 71-foot Cerberus fossae impact crater was the main finding. This discovery is likely to help scientists differentiate between signals from internal quakes and those caused by meteoroid impacts. Initially, they believed that Cerberus fossae produced a lot of high-frequency seismic signals linked to quakes originating inside Mars. But the new data suggests that some of this activity may have been caused by impacts, not internal processes. Another mystery scientists haven't been able to crack for 50 years is why Mars is split into two very different halves. But thanks to recordings of Marsquakes, they may have finally found the answer. Since the 1970s, researchers have known that Mars has two distinct regions. The northern lowlands cover about 2/3 of the planet's northern hemisphere, and the southern highlands make up the rest. The southern highlands sit about 3 miles higher than the northern lowlands, and the crust, the planet's outer layer, like a shell, is thicker in the south. This strange divide is known as the Martian dichotomy. There are two potential explanations for this imbalance. One theory suggests that an unknown internal process within Mars created the difference. The other claims that a massive collision, probably with a moon-sized space rock or several smaller impacts, once reshaped the planet's surface. But Mars' surface is extremely old. That's why pinpointing exactly what happened has been difficult. But now, a new study, published on December 27, 2024, has used Marsquake data from NASA's InSight lander to figure out whether the cause of this difference lies deep inside the planet. InSight was positioned near the boundary between the northern lowlands and southern highlands. Its mission included recording seismic data from Marsquakes, which travel through the planet's mantle, the rock layer beneath the crust. So scientists compared how these waves moved under both lowlands and highlands. They looked for differences in the planet's deep interior. It turns out that the seismic waves lost energy much faster when traveling through the southern highlands. It means that the mantle beneath this region is significantly hotter than in the north. It's compelling evidence that internal planetary forces, rather than an external impact, cause Mars' unusual split. The research team believes that the temperature difference between Mars' two halves can be traced back to ancient tectonic activity. It once shaped the planet, but later stopped. At some point in the past, Mars had moving tectonic plates, like Earth's. As these plates shifted, they, along with the molten rock beneath them, could have created the Martian dichotomy. But eventually, the movement stopped, leaving behind what scientists call a stagnant lid. That's a thick, immobile layer over the planet's molten interior. If this turns out to be true, it might mean that the mantle beneath the southern highlands is still pushing upward, while the mantle under the northern lowlands is sinking deeper toward the planet's core. This ongoing process could explain why Mars' crust is thicker in the south. At the same time, we can't completely rule out the idea that an external impact created the dichotomy. Some recent studies suggest that a giant collision could still be a possible explanation. To solve this mystery for good, scientists will need more Marsquake data and detailed models of how Mars originally formed. By the way, if you ever decide to visit Mars, you might come across the hero of our video today, the InSight lander itself. It was supposed to launch in March 2016, but a problem with one of its instruments caused a delay. It was a vacuum leak in the seismometer. NASA rescheduled the launch for May 2018, and the issue was fixed in the meantime. But this delay increased the total cost from $675 million to $830 million. Still, InSight successfully landed on Mars on November 26, 2018. But over time, dust built up on its solar panels, making it harder to recharge. The InSight lander runs on solar panels and batteries, but it needs occasional wind gusts, called cleaning events, to clear dust from the panels. Unfortunately, the place where InSight landed didn't get enough of these winds to keep the lander fully powered. By February 2021, during the Martian winter, thick dust had covered the panels, and they were only producing 27% of their full capacity. To save power, NASA started putting InSight into hibernation mode, shutting down instruments gradually to keep its electronics warm. They hoped better weather would allow the lander to recharge and wake up by July 2021. In May 2021, the team found a clever way to restore some power by using the lander's arm to move sand onto the panels, helping the wind clean off some of the dust. But eventually, InSight was only generating 1/10 of the power from the sunlight than it did right upon arrival. In July 2022, NASA put it in low power mode to keep detecting Marsquakes. The lander kept operating until December 2022. On December 20th, NASA announced that InSight had lost contact with Earth on December 15th, and the mission officially ended on December 21st, 2022. We've been dreaming about life on Mars for a long time. Not only about growing potatoes there in the future, but also about all the potatoes that could have been there in the past. Has there ever been life on Mars? Recently, scientists have found something that could be evidence of that. Let's find out what happened. Mars is the fourth planet from the Sun. A human hasn't set foot on Mars yet, but robots have set their wheels. The first spacecraft that visited the Red Planet were NASA Viking landers. They flew there back in 1976 and sent us a lot of interesting data. Back then, we didn't know anything about Mars. To us, it looked like a cold, lifeless desert. But since we're so similar, scientists began to wonder, has it always been like this? Or is it possible that once Mars used to be thriving and full of life? And in 2022, NASA's Mars rover Perseverance found something that could shed a light on this mystery. But first of all, what is Perseverance? Scientists have suggested that if there was life on Mars once, it's unlikely that it could simply disappear without a trace. It must have left some traces, perhaps underground, where they would be protected from radioactive solar tantrums and other nastiness. So we need to check the rocks. It's important to note that we aren't looking for life on Mars right now. There most likely isn't any. Instead, we want to look into the distant past of our twin planet. We're talking billions of years ago, when Mars could have been warm, green, and far from lifeless. In other words, we have to find dead microbes and various chemical compounds similar to ones on the Earth. This is the mission of our main character, Perseverance. It arrived on Mars in February of 2021. The spacecraft landed on the bottom of the 30-mile-wide Jezero crater, and after landing, it scooted over to the west, to the place that prompted scientists to choose Jezero for research. This place is a dried-up river delta, and this former river is already more than 3.5 billion years old. The Jezero crater itself was once a large lake. Yup, apparently there was life on Mars, and scientists have suggested that these places would be perfect as bodyguards of microbes. That's exactly what bacteria do on Earth. They hide, being still in the depths of lakes and ponds, so we could probably find traces there. The researchers believe that this particular lake has the highest scientific value in the entire mission. The highest chance to find rocks on which such bacteria could survive is here in Jezero. So Perseverance went to the delta. The row wasn't easy though. The rover missed a little and landed further than planned. As one famous movie said, "This little maneuver's going to cost us 51 years." Fortunately, Perseverance took only 1 year, and on the way, it was able to explore Jezero a little. The rover uses a complex built-in tool to explore the world. The tool is called Scanning Habitable Environments with Raman and Luminescence for Organics and Chemicals, or just SHERLOC. Boy, NASA sure loves its acronyms. As the device approached the delta, the signal of organic molecules became stronger. Soon, these signals were everywhere, and besides, they were the brightest that the scientists have ever seen. What does it mean? Elementary, my dear Watson. You know, Sherlock. It's time to dig. Since July 2021, Perseverance has drilled and collected 4 thin cores of sedimentary rock. The total number of collected rocks at the moment is 12. This is the first time in history that we're collecting something like this on another planet. These 4 cores were found on 2 rocks called Skinner Ridge and Wildcat Ridge. The first pair of cores, the ones from the Skinner Ridge, don't seem very interesting at first glance. They're quite close to what we can find in many places on Earth. However, if we look at them closer, we'll see that they're dotted with round grains of some dark material. These dark grains could have once been deposited on them by an ancient river, the same one that flowed into Jezero. It's possible that the river brought them from places hundreds of miles away from Jezero, and that's pretty cool. If we study these cores, we'll be able to learn even more about the far corners of Mars. Well, there are no corners on it, but you get the idea. Then, in April 2022, Perseverance did arrive at the delta, and then scientists finally found what they were looking for. The discovery, to put it mildly, excited them. They found 2 more cores, which held organic substances. This pair was taken from the Wildcat Ridge. It's found very close to the Skinner Ridge, but the 2 rocks are quite different from each other. These samples are lighter in color and more uniform. Most likely, they're mudstone, an unusual rock similar to clay but harder and unable to absorb water. They're also finer grained than the cores of the Skinner Ridge. Why does it matter? Because the finer the grains in the stone, the more likely it is that there may be some traces of a past life in it. On Earth, fine-grained stones most often lie on the bottoms of ponds and in similar places. There, they can preserve the remains of dead organisms and similar stuff for years. And this is exactly what we found on them. Additionally, according to scientists, there was more organic matter in these 2 cores than in any other place studied by Perseverance so far. It probably accumulated there while the lake was gradually evaporating billions of years ago. So, there really was life on Mars? Well, let's slow down a little. Organic substances are molecules holding carbon. And yes, on Earth, they're most often associated with life, but not always. Sometimes they can form as a result of other things. Therefore, we cannot say for sure whether there was life on Mars. We don't know if these molecules really remain from some Martian microbes, or if they're the result of some other things. But the discovery is still very significant. We have to literally keep digging this way. To learn more about this organic matter, scientists need to collect a couple more samples of fine-grained rock. It would also be great to study the material lying around these former reservoirs. Perseverance has already moved to another area, to a place with a beautiful name, Enchanted Lake. Now it needs to look for similar things there. It will also continue to study Lake Jezero. Eventually, Perseverance will climb to the top of the delta and then continue exploring ancient sites outside the crater. Sometime before the end of 2022, Perseverance will probably have 6 or more samples of the Martian cores. Unfortunately, its tools, though complex, are quite limited. This data alone won't be enough for us to get a complete picture. Therefore, NASA plans to send other spacecraft to Jezero in the coming years. Together with the European Space Agency, they're working on the next robotic mission, known as the Mars Sample Return. The name speaks for itself. These devices will arrive and take away all the test tubes from the old Prospector Perseverance. After that, these samples will be delivered to Earth, though not by Amazon Prime, and then scientists will be able to analyze them in advanced laboratories. However, all this will take a really long time. The launch of this mission is scheduled for 2027-2028, and the spacecrafts won't be able to return until 2033. But if everything goes well, it will be the first samples in history delivered to Earth from Mars. In other words, there's still enough space for research, literally. And yes, we don't yet know the true meaning of these finds. But that's why the entire mission was created, right? And who knows? Maybe in a few years we'll finally find out the truth about what happened on Mars billions of years ago. Ooh, check out The Martian! Made you look. Look.
Some of the most terrifying conspiracy theories might actually be true. But which of them? Let's figure out. You might have heard about the conspiracy surrounding Project Sunshine, for example. A few decades ago, the US government started a study to measure the effects of nuclear fallout on the human body. And according to some people, authorities were stealing bodies to do radioactive testing. However eerie it sounds, it's partially the truth, but in reality, parts of dead bodies went missing. And because for the research they needed young tissue, they were looking for recently deceased children, and then took samples without notification or permission from the more than 1,500 grieving families. The next conspiracy claims that, during Prohibition, authorities poisoned alcohol to stop people from drinking. Strangely, the truth is even more somber. Even before Prohibition, industrial alcohol contained toxic chemicals. However, between 1926 and 1933, the government ordered manufacturers to add even more lethal substances to prevent bootleggers from turning it into drinkable alcohol. Have you heard about the idea that President Woodrow Wilson's stroke left him unable to govern, so his wife secretly took over? It's actually true. In 1919, Wilson had a severe stroke, which left him debilitated. The government kept the situation under wraps, and Edith Wilson controlled access to the president and made key decisions on his behalf. Basically, she effectively led the country for over a year. This conspiracy is outright creepy. It claims that the CIA experimented with LSD and other substances on unwitting Americans as part of a secret mind control project. Sadly, this was not just a rumor. MKUltra was a real CIA program. It started in the 1950s with volunteers, but soon escalated to dosing people without their knowledge. Some even suffered long-term psychological damage, another outrageous conspiracy.
the Dalai Lama worked with the CIA. Are you ready to find out the truth? During the 1960s, the CIA secretly sent financial support to the Tibetan resistance against China. Declassified documents confirm that the Dalai Lama received an annual stipend of $180,000 as part of this initiative. Now, do you believe that the FBI spied on John Lennon? Well, Lennon's outspoken opposition to the Vietnam War and his influence on the counterculture movement made him a target. The Nixon administration viewed him as a political threat, so the FBI indeed closely monitored him. But what about you? Could the government use technology to track you? Unfortunately, in the digital age, privacy concerns are very real. In 2016 alone, US agencies submitted nearly 50,000 data requests to Facebook, 28,000 to Google, and 9,000 to Apple. Mass surveillance is likely growing. Even webcams and smart devices could be used for monitoring. The next conspiracy goes like this. Tobacco companies were hiding the dangers of smoking for decades. Unfortunately, even in the 1950s, studies showed a clear link between smoking and lung cancer. However, tobacco companies worked to suppress this information, funding misleading research and marketing campaigns to downplay the risks. One of the most popular conspiracy theories claims that an extraterrestrial is buried in New Mexico. And guess what? The claim is partly true, but not in the way many think. In 1983, Atari's E.T. the Extraterrestrial video game flopped so badly that the company dumped thousands of unsold cartridges in a landfill in the New Mexico desert. This sparked urban legends about something more mysterious. The truth was only revealed when the site was excavated in 2014. And how about the Illuminati, a secret society controlling the world and having ties to the NSA? While many believe in the existence of a shadowy elite pulling the strings, the only proven connection between the Illuminati and the NSA is a digital coincidence. Typing Illuminati backward, Itanimuli, into a web browser redirects to the NSA's website. Most likely, this is the work of a prankster who purchased the domain. One of the most eerie conspiracies involves the Bohemian Grove, a secluded retreat in California, where influential figures from around the world gather annually. Today, powerful individuals meet there every July for what is officially described as a casual retreat. However, history suggests that significant discussions take place. The early ideas for the Manhattan Project, which led to the development of the American nuclear bomb, were conceived here. Security at Bohemian Grove is strict, and access is invitation only. Very few photographs of the gatherings exist since photography is prohibited. Women are traditionally not allowed to attend. There are reports of unusual ceremonies taking place around a massive owl statue at the site, but the true nature of these rituals remains unknown.
It was the year 2015 when U.S. Navy pilots flying training missions off the East Coast saw something truly eerie. They spotted oval-shaped objects moving quickly over the water. They seemed to rotate as they flew. At first, the pilots thought it was just one object, but soon they realized there were many of them, moving in unusual ways. These objects didn't look like normal aircraft. They didn't have visible engines, didn't produce exhaust, and didn't just hover near the sea like helicopters would. Some of them appeared at altitudes of 30,000 feet and were moving faster than the speed of sound. The strangest and scariest thing? The pilots had been observing similar objects almost every day for months. Mind you, those weren't rookie pilots. One of them was an experienced pilot with 10 years in the Navy. He, along with his fellow pilots, knew what typical aircraft looked like and how to stay calm under pressure. It wasn't until 2019 that the public heard about those sightings. That's when the New York Times published an article revealing them. The article included video footage taken by the pilots' plane cameras, which was later confirmed by the US Navy in April 2020. The Navy officially released the videos soon after. In recent years, sightings of UFOs, now called unexplained aerial phenomena, have been reported by other reliable sources as well. The US government has started to take these sightings seriously and has even brought in scientists to quietly investigate what might be behind them. So far, we still don't know exactly what the pilots and others have seen. But this growing scientific interest is pushing us closer to finding out more. While military pilots reporting UFOs might be a recent development, the public has been observing and reporting them for decades. In fact, the UFO craze in the US can be traced back to the summer of 1947. On June 14th of that year, a rancher discovered strange debris on his land near Roswell, New Mexico. At first, he thought it was from a kite. But even after looking through the bits of rubber, tinfoil, paper, and wood, he still couldn't make sense of it. The rancher then told the local sheriff about his find. And since his ranch was close to the Roswell Army airfield, the sheriff reported it to the military. Officers came to check it out and couldn't identify the wreckage either. The next day, the Army issued a press release saying that they had recovered the remains of a flying saucer. The local newspaper even ran a headline, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell." But just a few days later, the Army changed its story, claiming the debris was from a weather balloon. By then, though, the excitement over UFOs had already sparked, and UFO fever spread across the nation. Now, UFOs are real, in the sense that people have indeed seen objects they can't identify in the sky. But when people ask, are UFOs real? They usually mean, are we being visited by aliens? And science doesn't have an answer to that yet. After the Roswell incident, UFO sightings became more frequent. People made wild claims, saying they'd met aliens or even been abducted. These stories were mysterious and captivating. No wonder they gained traction. The government didn't help much since it was keeping its own secrets. Eventually, they admitted to hiding something, but it wasn't little green men from other planets. In 1995, the Air Force released a report explaining that the debris found on Brazel's ranch wasn't from a weather balloon, but from Project Mogul, a secret Cold War program that used balloons to detect missile launches of certain countries. As for the alien bodies people claim to have seen, they were crash test dummies used in experiments with ejection seats. In 2021, the US government released a brief report on UAPs, aka unexplained aerial phenomena, stating that they have found no evidence of aliens. At the same time, they acknowledged that many UAP sightings had been recorded since 2004, and those remained unexplained. According to the report, those sightings did not necessarily point to alien spacecraft. Some could be birds, debris like party balloons, secret military projects, or even new technology from other countries. In May 2022, Congress held a public hearing on UFOs, and high-ranking military officials testified there. They revealed that since 2021, 400 unexplained sightings had been documented, but none suggested extraterrestrial life. At the same time, there's more and more evidence hinting that Earth may not be the only place with life in the universe. Earth itself is 4.5 billion years old, and life emerged here around 3.5 to 4 billion years ago. Life on Earth began fairly quickly, which means that the process of life forming wasn't overly difficult. And if life could begin easily on Earth, it's likely that it could also start on many other planets in the universe. The Milky Way galaxy alone contains 1 trillion planets, and there may be trillions more in the universe. Given these numbers, there is a lot of potential for life elsewhere. However, just because there's a possibility of life elsewhere doesn't necessarily mean that aliens have visited Earth. That's why SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence researchers, are focused on detecting signs of life elsewhere in the universe, not on studying UFOs. For a long time, most scientists dismissed the study of UFOs as pseudoscience. That's why many researchers interested in UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, stayed silent to avoid being seen as eccentric. But this has started to change. In June 2022, NASA created a team of scientific experts to search for the unknown in air and space. The researchers suggested using NASA's huge amount of space data to assist in the study of UAPs. The team also made it clear that studies of UAPs should focus on evidence and data, not speculation. Instead of simply collecting stories or relying on accidental sightings, the researchers used telescopes to capture footage of the sky. They gather this data and then analyze it with the help of artificial intelligence. They plan to add more observatories, and over 100 scientists are already involved. Astrobiologist Julia DeMarines suggests that some UAP sightings could be caused by unusual weather conditions. For instance, spacecraft launched near sunset can create strange effects. The gases expelled by spacecraft reflect only the light reaching the upper atmosphere at that time. And since the sunlight remains reflective for a long period, such sightings can seem unexplainable. UAPs might also be caused by light reflecting off communication satellites. But could UAPs really be alien spaceships? People often expect first contact with alien life to be dramatic, but the reality might be more subtle. Our first encounter with alien life may actually be discovering their technology. For example, we might find a piece of space debris that didn't originate on Earth, like spotting an empty plastic bag blowing through space. We'd know it didn't come from Earth, but we wouldn't know where it came from. Another possibility is that the aliens we might encounter may no longer exist. In 1961, astronomer Frank Drake developed the Drake equation, which estimates how many alien civilizations might be capable of sending signals. The equation considers factors like the rate at which stars form and the number of planets capable of supporting life in a Goldilocks zone, a habitable zone located at the right distance from a star for water to remain a liquid. However, one key factor in the equation is represented by L, which stands for the length of time technological civilizations produce detectable signs of their existence. Humanity has only been technologically advanced for a little over 100 years, in a universe that is nearly 14 billion years old. It means that the timing for civilizations to overlap might be rare. Many civilizations might have existed before us, and many may come after us, but the chance that we overlap with theirs is slim. Despite this, some scientists believe that it won't be long before we find definitive evidence of alien life. Are we alone in the universe? It's a question we've all asked ourselves, perhaps on a quiet, starry night, while gazing at the constellations and feeling small in the vastness of the cosmos. But what if science could actually answer it? Astrophysicists have been pondering this for decades. Back in the 1960s, a groundbreaking formula was introduced to estimate the chances of intelligent life within our galaxy, the Milky Way. It's called the Drake equation, and it was the first logical attempt to tackle this profound mystery. But here's the exciting part. After decades without a formula surpassing Frank Drake's, scientists at Durham University in England have introduced a brand new model that could help us understand the odds of life existing across multiple universes. Intrigued? Let's dive in. Frank Drake, a radio astronomer and SETI pioneer, introduced his famous equation in 1961. He aimed to estimate the number of civilizations in the Milky Way capable of emitting detectable radio signals. But Drake knew that certain conditions would have to be met. After all, how could a microorganism on a distant planet send us signals without even possessing intelligence? The equation itself is straightforward. Drake considered variables like the number of stars formed annually, the planets orbiting them in the habitable zone, neither too cold nor too hot, the fraction of planets where life could thrive and evolve, and finally, the lifespan of such civilizations. With these factors, the equation intended to address one big question. How many civilizations in our galaxy could be broadcasting signals right now? Since its publication, the Drake equation has sparked endless debate among scientists about the values of its variables. Its simplicity makes it brilliant, but also a constant reminder of how much we still don't know. So what makes this 2024 model so revolutionary? The researchers factored in something the Drake equation didn't: the expansion of the universe and the role of dark energy. This mysterious force, which makes up 2/3 of the total matter in our universe, accelerates its expansion. But here's the catch. For life to form, ordinary matter must clump together to create stars and planets. These stars and planets must remain stable for billions of years to allow life to evolve. This new model calculates the likelihood of intelligent life forming not just in our universe but across hypothetical universes, a scenario known as the multiverse theory. This research doesn't estimate the quantity of intelligent life in our universe. Instead, it calculates the likelihood of an observer existing in a universe with specific characteristics. And here's where it gets interesting. The researchers found that a typical observer in another universe would likely experience more dark matter than we do. In other words, our universe is statistically unusual. They also discovered that a more efficient universe, one that could convert up to 27% of its ordinary matter into stars, might have better odds of forming life. By comparison, our universe only converts about 23%. More stars mean more chances for life to develop. So, while our universe isn't the best candidate for fostering life, we're proof that the improbable is possible. This branch of science, called computational cosmology, blends theory, physics, programming, and statistics to tackle one of the universe's greatest mysteries, the role of dark matter in shaping the universe. Dr. Daniele Sorini from Durham University explains that understanding the parameters governing our universe, such as dark matter density, could even help us understand why we exist. A profound thought, isn't it? And here's the kicker. While a universe with more dark matter might have more stars and better odds of forming life, our existence proves that life can thrive against the odds. So, as we gaze into the night sky and wonder who or what might be out there, one thing is clear. We're part of something extraordinary, even in a universe that's anything but ordinary. The United States Air Force came up with the term UFO, unidentified flying object, back in 1953. And over time, it's come to mean anything that might hint at aliens trying to contact us. There's an actual field called ufology, dedicated to studying these kinds of things. But there's an unexpected twist. The authorities don't really like the term UFO anymore. Instead, they've switched to calling them UAP, which stands for Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon. It sure sounds more professional, doesn't it? It also kind of distances the term from decades of wild alien theories tied to UFOs. Now, if you're into UFOs or UAPs, this is actually a pretty exciting time. Back in December 2020, when the government passed a huge spending bill, there was a little clause tucked in there about UFOs. Basically, it called for more transparency and pushed agencies to share what they know. And shockingly, the CIA has recently dumped all of its declassified UFO documents online. That's 2,780 pages of material now available to the public, and you can find it all on a site called the Black Vault. It's run by John Greenewald Jr., a guy who's basically dedicated his life to collecting and sharing UFO-related info. But of course, getting those documents wasn't easy. Greenewald had to file over 10,000 Freedom of Information Act requests to pry them out of the government's hands. He says the whole process was like pulling teeth. And even now, the files aren't exactly user-friendly. They're in an outdated format, multi-page TIFF files, and the text scans are messy, making it hard to search through them. To help, Greenewald converted the whole collection into 713 PDFs. But even then, some of the documents were poorly photocopied, which made it tricky to dig into the details. Still, UFO fans have already uncovered some wild stuff. One document mentions a Bosnian fugitive claiming to have had contact with aliens. According to the document, at the time it was written, Radovan Karadzic remained alive, but the authorities didn't know where he was. The rumors of his near capture lacked evidence, and NATO countries blamed each other for failing to act. Critics saw the hunt for Karadzic as part of a political circus, with no real effort to bring him to justice. But the real question is whether they didn't want to, or just couldn't, because he wasn't on Earth anymore. Another document talks about mysterious explosions at midnight in a small Russian town. On the 12th of April, a powerful midnight explosion shook Sassovo, a small city in Russia's Ryazan region. The blast caused a lot of damage. It ripped off roofs, shattered windows, and rocked buildings like an earthquake. No one was seriously injured, but many people were shocked. Schools and kindergartens were closed, and buildings were temporarily patched with plastic sheeting. At the time when the document was written, the cause of the explosion was still a mystery. Theories ranged from buried World War II munitions, a falling air bomb, a meteorite, or a fiery UFO sighting reported by locals. Military experts suspected ammonium nitrate stored nearby, though this fertilizer had been safely used for years. A massive crater, 92 feet wide and 13 feet deep, was the only evidence of the disaster.
One of the most intriguing finds is a 1970s document showing the Assistant Deputy Director for Science and Technology personally receiving some mysterious UFO-related info. But of course, like most government releases, a lot of the good stuff is blacked out. Greenewald still hopes and fights to get those redacted sections declassified. There must be something special about that information. As you see, digging into this data takes a lot of patience. You're basically wasting hours and hours of your life hoping to find something that stands out. But if you're still curious, check out the Black Vault. You might discover something mysterious and creepy in those thousands of pages.
It looks like a regular beach, but something sets off an alarm blaring in your head. The sand looks too red, the sun is too bright, the wind is all wrong, it's hard to breathe, and there's no water in the ocean. Well, panic not. It's normal, since you're on Mars. For the longest time, we've seen Mars as a dry, lifeless dust ball, a freezing desert where water exists only as ice or vapor. But new research suggests that billions of years ago, it was a totally different place. And instead of endless dust, it may have had something much more familiar to us – sunny, sandy beaches. Scientists from Penn State, UC Berkeley, and Guangzhou University studied radar data from China's Zhurong rover. It started to roll across Mars in 2021. While exploring the surface of the red planet, it found sloping rock formations that looked strikingly similar to the ones found on Earth's coastlines. Those are called foreshore deposits. They form when waves push sand onto a shoreline. But Zhurong wasn't just taking pretty pictures. It also had ground-penetrating radar, a tool that allowed it to scan deep below the Martian surface as it traveled 1.2 miles between May 2021 and May 2022. And it found something pretty wild. Layers of sediment sloping down at a 15-degree angle. This pattern is identical to the ones left behind by waves on Earth. And this wasn't from the wind, volcanoes, or anything else. It just looked like a real beach. And that's actually a big deal. Because if there were waves and tides, there must have been a large body of water. That means Mars may have once had just the right conditions for hosting life. Even after 3.5 billion years, the formations are still incredibly similar to beaches on Earth. So there must have been a time when Mars was much more than just a dusty rock in space. After revealing this shocking news, Zhurong's radar scanned 260 feet deep into the ground, discovering sediment layers. They once formed along a path perpendicular to an ancient shoreline, the one that likely existed 4 billion years ago. At the same time, it might not be all that surprising. Back then, Mars wasn't the dry, frozen wasteland we see today. It had a thicker atmosphere, a warmer climate, and plenty of liquid water. And I'm not even talking about some tiny puddle. Beaches don't form without a massive body of water. For waves to shape the land like this, there had to be rivers flowing into a vast ocean. Powerful currents had to be moving sand around, and water had to stick around for a long time. This couldn't be just a brief wet spell. It was a period where Mars was hydrologically active for millions of years, potentially being a place where life could have thrived. This discovery gives even more weight to one theory. It has been puzzling scientists since the 1970s. That's when NASA's Viking spacecraft snapped images of what looked like a shoreline wrapping around Mars's northern hemisphere. But there was a problem. The shoreline was all over the place, with elevations varying by up to 6 miles. Wow, which is nothing like our flat, mostly consistent shorelines we see on Earth. This difference made scientists doubt that a Martian ocean ever existed. For years, scientists have been trying to crack this mystery. In 2007, they suggested that Mars' rotation actually shifted billions of years ago. As the planet's massive Tharsis volcanic region grew, the planet's spin axis tilted, warping the surface. It could explain why the shoreline is so uneven today. In other words, what once was a flat and level landscape got distorted over time. Interestingly, Mars has been dropping hints about its watery past for years. Curiosity found ancient ripples in Gale Crater. There were signs of a long-gone lake. Perseverance is currently studying a fossilized river delta in Jezero Crater. Now, with Zhurong's evidence of an ancient ocean, it all comes together. Small lakes? Check. Rivers? Check. A massive ocean covering the northern lowlands? Quite possibly. Zhurong's mission wrapped up in May 2022 after dust blocked its solar panels, but future missions could still explore those ancient shoreline deposits. Scientists might send new missions to drill deeper into the ground to retrieve samples. Or we could use better radar to map Mars' subsurface in more detail. There's a real hope to excavate those areas in the future and find even more clues about Mars' past. At the same time, NASA's Perseverance rover is already working hard in Jezero crater collecting samples. Scientists hope that it will bring them back to Earth in the 2030s. While those won't include samples from the ancient ocean, they could still help us find out more about Mars's wetter history. For now, the discovery of ancient beaches on Mars gives us a peek into a time when the planet might have looked a lot more like Earth, with water, waves, and rivers. Now let's speak about the Perseverance rover that's still working on Mars in more detail. It has a special drill on its arm and uses it to scrape off the dust and top layers of rock, making small 2-inch wide circles in Jezero crater. Once, one of its cameras took a close-up photo, and the image showed that the rock wasn't smooth. It was made of tiny interlocking crystals. The rover used 2 special tools to analyze the rock's chemistry. The results confirmed that the rock, named Rochette, was volcanic. It meant it formed from lava or magma, not from mud and clay, like scientists had expected from a former lakebed. Perseverance, also known as Percy, landed on Mars in February 2021, along with a small helicopter named Ingenuity. It is the most advanced rover ever sent to Mars, following in the footsteps of Curiosity, Spirit, Opportunity, and others. But Percy has a different mission. While older rovers mainly studied Martian rocks and climate, Perseverance is searching for signs of past life. Scientists chose Jezero crater because it looks like it used to be a lake where tiny life forms could have lived. The rover drills, scrapes, and collects rock samples to study with its science tools. It also saves some samples to bring back to Earth in the future for even closer study. Perseverance has found some surprising things on Mars. Scientists studying the data it sent back have discovered that Jezero crater has changed a lot over time. Long ago, this area had flowing lava, a lake that lasted for thousands of years, rivers that carried mud and sand, and even massive floods that brought in rocks from far away. It means that Jezero's history is more active and unpredictable than scientists expected. This definitely made it harder to find the sedimentary rocks they were looking for. But it has also revealed new places where ancient life might have existed. Another exciting discovery is that every rock Perseverance has studied so far contains carbon-based materials, the same stuff that life on Earth is built from. NASA's Perseverance rover also carries a special tool called MOXIE, which has managed to make oxygen from the carbon dioxide in Mars' atmosphere for the first time. Over 16 test runs, MOXIE produced about 4 ounces of oxygen. That's enough to keep an astronaut breathing for about 4 hours. It worked even better than expected, making up to 0.42 ounces of oxygen per hour. After running successfully for 2 years, MOXIE completed its final test in September 2023. It brings us one step closer to sending humans to Mars in the future. In any case, back to the discovery of ancient shorelines on Mars. This finding might help us see the red planet with new eyes. Water might have been flowing across its surface for tens of millions of years, carving out lakes, rivers, and even a vast ocean. What else have we misunderstood? Did Martian dinos stroll across the vast green valleys of the planet? Or were those bizarre marine creatures the likes of which we can't even imagine? Well, we don't know yet, but one thing is very likely. Mars had an era of warmth, water, and maybe life. Imagine if somewhere, trillions of light years away from our world, there's another version of you watching this very video right now. Not as crazy as it might sound. The multiverse theory is having its time of the day, from Marvel's movies to Spider-Verses to the recent famous hit Everything Everywhere All at Once. But it's not just some wild sci-fi concept. Physicists have been talking about this theory for decades. Let's see what they say. Do parallel worlds exist? If they do, let's hope that this is the reality where you click that subscribe button before diving into the video. Now everything starts with the Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, the universe, with everything we know, was crammed into an unbelievably tiny, super hot, and mega-dense point. Our universe is about to burst into existence. And then, boom! The most colossal event you can imagine happens. In an instant, this tiny point expands with indescribable speed. It's the beginning of everything – time, space, and all the galaxies that surround us. Then, like an extremely hot balloon, the universe started stretching out in all directions, which sounds logical, but what's curious is that this inflationary epoch lasted for an incredibly brief time, in less than a blink of an eye. It's like the universe hit the fast-forward button, and then everything eventually slowing down over time. After this speedy phase, the universe kept growing, but at a more normal pace. This rapid expansion is called inflationary cosmology. It explains some big mysteries about our world. It tells us why it looks the same in all directions, why the background radiation is evenly spread, why galaxies are where they are, and so on. The details of how this cosmic inflation works are still a bit mysterious, but scientists are on it, and the theory itself is universally accepted. But it wasn't always this way. To scientists, this idea sounded like insane sci-fi at first. However, it explains so many things that the scientists just had no choice but pay attention to it. However, its initial weirdness was just the beginning. Now, according to this theory, inflation might not be a one-time thing. It could be happening repeatedly, maybe even endlessly. Picture the universe as a never-ending cycle, with each burst of inflation creating its own bubble universe. And the most important thing is that these bubble universes might not play by the same rules. Some could be totally weird, where the laws of physics are going crazy in ways we can't even fathom. Which means there might be a whole constellation of bubble universes out there. However, we can't directly see these other bubbles. They exist beyond the edge of our spotlight. That's where the multiverse theory comes into play. People have been chatting about the idea of multiple universes for a long time, like way back in ancient Greece. Now, back in the 1990s, people got really interested in this idea, and this concept started popping up in books and movies. As a result, scientists began talking about it increasingly in scientific discussions and journal articles. And nowadays, many scientists and philosophers are into it. Now, the problem is, there's no solid proof or evidence that these other universes really exist. It's not a proved or confirmed theory. It's not even a theory at all, just a hypothesis, a bunch of interesting thoughts put together. Before we draw any conclusions, we need much more in the way of clues and evidence, and unfortunately, it's hard to find the evidence of parallel worlds when we can't live or look past our own, which is why many scientists believe that it might not be real. But not everybody agrees with that. While critics say that we can't observe the multiverse and therefore can't test it, some physicists suggest a different approach. Instead of trying to find these parallel worlds, we could try to look at ours and its history. Around the 2010s, researchers took a closer look at data from a space gadget called the Wilkinson Microwave Anisotropy Probe. Yes, that's a mouthful. They thought they found signs suggesting that our universe might have bumped into other universes in the past, like sort of a collision. But then scientists used an even fancier satellite, which had 3 times better resolution, looked at the data more thoroughly, and didn't find any strong proof of these universe collisions. Plus, there was no evidence that other universes were tugging on ours with their gravity. However, an interesting discovery happened in 2015. One scientist checked out radiation left over from the Big Bang. He claimed to see something super bright, 4,500 times brighter than expected. Well, at least based on the stuff, like protons and electrons, scientists think existed in the early universe. So he and some others assumed that this might be our first evidence of our universe crashing into others. But let's assume that it does exist. The multiverse wouldn't be about human decisions creating alternate timelines. In quantum mechanics, it's not human decisions that split everything into parallel worlds, but the measurement of subatomic particles. So if we look at this theory scientifically, Other worlds would be billions of light years away, and what's happening to them wouldn't have anything to do with our daily choices. So what would it look like? Well, Max Tegmark, for example, talks about 4 levels of universes and multiverses. Level 1 is the extension of our world. Our universe is a big place, and in an infinite universe, there would be infinite chunks like ours, each with its own story. Most of these chunks might look different from ours, but because there are so many, some might look just like ours, but they'd be really, really far away. Level 2 is a universe with different physical constants. This idea says that our universe is part of a much bigger space where bubbles form. Each bubble might have its own set of rules, like different laws of physics. Level 3 is the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. This one's a bit tricky. In the quantum world, things can be weird. Imagine rolling a dice. Each number that comes up might create a separate universe. So if you rolled a dice and got a 3, in another universe, it would be a 6, and so on. Yeah, my head's spinning. This idea suggests that every possible outcome in quantum events creates a whole new universe. And level 4 is the ultimate ensemble. This level gets super abstract. It says that everything, every possible universe or reality can be described using math. I wish now I hadn't fallen asleep in algebra. Imagine all the different math equations describing every conceivable way the universe could be. This level says that every math equation that can describe a universe actually exists, and they're all real in their own way. Stephen Hawking was a proponent of the Level 3 many worlds interpretation. It was one of his last theories before he passed away. He predicted that the universe is finite and far simpler than many current theories about the Big Bang say. According to Hawking, the universe is like a giant quantum system, a sea of possibilities and probabilities. In this view, every outcome of the universe's history plays out in parallel existences, and we, as observers, play a crucial role. Our existence and what we observe, according to Hawking, actively shapes the universe we see. In simple words, the universe is a canvas and we're all painters. Sounds very cool and insane, but hey, many things in science were considered crazy before they turned out to be true. So, is there another copy of you somewhere watching this video and who just pressed the like button? Who knows? If there are infinite copies of us, scientists assume that we might be like identical twins, sharing the same origins and starting from one thing, but then developing into separate different people. And if these worlds exist, perhaps we can even visit them one day. There could be some connections between us, something that could allow for interdimensional travel. For example, wormholes. Well, whatever the truth may be, let's hope that one day we'll discover it. Until then, stay curious.